I'm Katie. I am an actor and filmmaker in the San Francisco Bay Area. I made my first film during the pandemic. It's called Aubergine. We just got distribution on TV High, which you can watch over at watchtvhigh.com. It's a great little comedy if you want to check it out. And because I made my first film and I had to deal with a bunch of contracts and things like that, and also being an actor, when I met Jessica, I got really excited with all of the knowledge that she could share. And so Jessica, if you want to give yourself a little intro.
Sure. My name is Jessica Litt. I am an attorney. I'm based in New York. I work for the Dramatists Guild as the Director of Business Affairs. So I'm out there on the front lines defending the work of playwrights every day.
So if anyone doesn't know, today what Jessica and I are going to be talking about is contracts. Just to kind of frame this conversation, we're going to focus on non-union indie productions, and this is for actors and filmmakers who are non-union working on indie productions. And we're going to do that because we find that that's where people need the most protections. Like if you're in the union, you have the union to protect you, but when you're working non-union projects, you're kind of on your own. We'll talk copyright and trademark, right of publicity, defamation, or other invasion of privacy claims. We'll talk film production, representation, and then generally we'll talk about contracts. Some of the first questions that I had are around general questions for working with a lawyer. The first one I have is, how do I know if I need a lawyer, or when is the right time to be working with a lawyer? In entertainment specifically.
Question. I think it depends on what your role is in the entertainment industry and what you're doing. Like if you're an actor, for instance, I'd say you want to have an attorney look over any agreement that you get. So if you are contracted to work in a play, if you're contracted for a commercial, a television show, movie, whatever it is, you should have a contract reviewed by an attorney. And if you're working on a production, we'll talk probably about this, where they're not offering you a contract, then you should talk to an attorney and be like, should I have a contract here? And if they're not going to present me with one, can you create one that I can present to that party? Now, if you're a filmmaker, if you're thinking about making a film, you should talk to an attorney as soon as you start the process, because there are a lot of contracts that come into play when creating film. That's, above the line agreements, below the line agreements, releases that you're going to have to get, location agreements that you're going to have reviewed, and having an attorney in place right away to help you navigate the contractual issues is really important, because trying to get contracts after the fact can be a very arduous task. I've worked with filmmakers who have completed an entire film and now they're like, oh, I need releases from all the people that were featured in my film, and now I have to track all those people down, or I have to blur them out, or something like that. So as early on in the process as possible, especially also for filmmakers. If you ever want to obtain errors and omissions insurance for your film, because you've gotten distribution and the distribution company requires errors and omission insurance, what you're probably going to have to provide is a fair use opinion from an attorney. And that means they've evaluated your film to determine if there are any copyright or trademark issues, and determine whether you need to get the license to use those in your film, or whether you can use them in your film on a strong argument of fair use. And so those are the reasons you should have an attorney as soon as you possibly can when you're making a film.
Totally. So you said a couple of things that I just want to call out real quick. Yeah. One, like getting contracts early, obviously as soon as possible. I do want to call out that as an actor, a lot of times we'll arrive on set and they will have contracts there for us to sign. Could you give suggestions on how to deal with that situation?
Well, one, I would say the minute you accept a role, or even before you accept a role, I would say, is there a contract here? Can I see some sort of written agreement about what I'm agreeing to do? Because if you're accepting a role and you don't know the terms of what you're accepting, that's not a great thing, because then you're kind of in this uncomfortable position when you walk on set and you don't have any option. You don't have anyone to review it for you, and you have no basis of negotiation, because it's like, I can't negotiate any of the terms on here, or else I literally have to walk away from this project. So I would say, just before you even get to the space, ask about contracts. And I'm gonna be, the lawyer in the room and say, if they get weird about contracts, that should be a red flag for you, to be honest with you. And sometimes it may come from a place of ignorance. Some people just don't understand, we're creatives. That's part of the reason I made this practice, is because I understand that creatives don't understand the business of things sometimes, and that's okay. And so it may be a point where you have to educate the filmmaker you're working with and say, actually, you should have a contract. And I think it's going to be good to protect us both. But ask as early on in the process so you don't ever wind up showing up to a set and having to sign something on the spot.
Totally. And I think a lot for like indie filmmakers, a lot of times they're like, oh, we don't have like a DocuSign account, or it's such a hassle to like send it to people digitally, whatever. And they're like, we'll just have people sign on set. Like it's not coming from like a predatory mindset, but it becomes predatory because it's not giving people the time that they need to then review it with someone like their lawyer or their agent and make sure that it's going to work for them.
Yeah. Let me just give like an example. So prior to working in entertainment law, I did commercial real estate. And I can tell you some of the biggest commercial leases that were signed were literally like someone printed out a page, they signed it, they scanned it, we combined the PDF. And like these are for some of like the biggest retailers and restaurant chains you've heard of. If you don't have a DocuSign account, that shouldn't be an excuse. Like we've all signed and know how to use scanners. So yeah.
I'll also say that one of the things that happened for me was, as a director, I was working with a friend and we didn't have a contract. And one of the, like, it's really great to have the legal protections of a contract, but also it sets expectations. So like I made a decision on set that I thought was the best decision. And the person that I didn't have the contract with wished that I had made a different decision. And we hadn't signed a contract about who was making the decisions.
Right.
Literally just having that to like set expectations, even with friends, is so important, and it protects the relationship. You know,
I would say working with friends, it's even more important to have a contract in place because you have that familiar relationship. Lines can get blurry and your relationship could be at stake, like you said. And to just be able to have a document that we can look to if there's ever a dispute and be like, okay, well, this is what we both already agreed on. It's the best thing. I like to think of contracts as like a conversation. They're not scary. I think people think contracts are scary, but they're not supposed to be scary. They're supposed to protect you and the other party.
Love that. Cool. Okay. I've got so many more questions. How do you know which lawyer is right for your project? Film versus TV versus music, etc.
That's a great question. I think one, if you're in the entertainment field, generally you're looking for an attorney who, one, has expertise in intellectual property. So they understand trademarks, they understand copyrights. But then on top of that, you also want to look for an entertainment attorney. The thing is, you want to do your research on your attorneys because it could be an entertainment attorney that has no experience working with independent film. Maybe they only work with the theatrical side. They're working with theater producers and whatnot. So you want to do your research and make sure that they have the expertise in whatever it is that you are contracting them to do. And I'm going to give you a tidbit on why you want to make sure that they have the expertise, because certain lawyers will charge you to learn. They will charge you because a lot of lawyers do an hourly rate. And part of the things that they're billing you for is the research to make sure that they know how to defend you or how to protect you. And so you don't want to be paying an attorney to learn. Would rather have an attorney already have that expertise. And I'll tell you, in my practice, if there's something I don't know, I don't charge my clients. I just go and learn it because it's good for me to know. But that's a practice that a lot of lawyers do. So just be aware of that.
Interesting. Okay. And then that brings us to our next question, which is, what is your expertise?
Sure. My expertise is I'm an intellectual property and entertainment attorney. My niche really is like, in my solo practice, it's like independent film, working with film and television actors, especially on the non-union side. I did a lot of that work when I was in law school. And then in my day job, I'm doing copyright as it relates to theatrical writers. So I have run the gamut there. And then I think contracts generally is my expertise. I love contracts. I love to create contracts. It's a very weird thing to love, but I find them like puzzles. And so I've done contracts for any number of things, because contracts are just understanding the relationship that you're trying to build and then building something out that thinks about any possible pitfall that could come with that relationship. And so again, I usually only work with like creative professionals and people in the entertainment industry when I'm doing contracts, because when I'm thinking about pitfalls, I know that industry, but contracts generally. Yeah.
Cool. And so I, for example, am in California. Mm-hmm. Currently, you're in New York.
Yes.
Are lawyers region specific? Like, could I work with you?
Yes and no. So the law is weird. You
Yeah.
have a member of the bar in each state. So you are specifically, I'm licensed in New York, so I'm only an expert on New York law. However, there's federal law, like copyright, trademark, that's federal law. And so there's a lot of things I could do feasibly for people outside of New York as it relates to federal law. There's like a lot of gray area in terms of the ethics for lawyers about practicing law in other states, especially as now that we live in this virtual world. So what I would suggest is just talk, like, one, if you are in a particular location like California and New York, they're both entertainment centric. California is more heavy on the film and television aspect, and New York is more heavy on the theater aspect. But lawyers in those states who are practicing entertainment law are going to have relevant experience to what you're doing. So I would look there, but also look for, if you have local attorneys that have the expertise, talk to them, because they may have connections for you in the future. They may have negotiated deals with people in your area before and have that relevant experience. So I think finding a lawyer is like finding a spouse. You really want to find someone that fits you, not just in what you need, but like your personality and all those things.
Totally. Love that. And you talked a little bit about this, but what should people look for in an entertainment lawyer?
I think the key, I'll go back and just say, is that they have expertise in what you are looking for, because obviously entertainment is a huge field. Like, I'm not going to go out there and say I understand how video game law works, because I don't. Mm-hmm. I wish I did, but I don't. And so you want to that's the key, is you want to make sure that they know, they have some experience in whatever it is that you are trying to get advice on.
And can you give some examples of the types of questions that can help kind of like root those things out?
Sure. I mean, simply ask, like, if you're doing an independent film, you can simply ask, have you ever worked with an independent filmmaker before? And if you know some of the key terms, like, I mean, it's like quizzing your lawyer, but it'd be like, do you know what a below line agreement means? And if they're like, I think that should be a red flag, maybe they don't. But in general, most lawyers on their websites, they should have, their practice areas. It would be against ethical laws to put it out there to say that they know something that they don't know. But again, there are lawyers that do that, and then they'll charge you to learn it. So you just want to, like, it seems like tricky, or like that you're being sneaky, but just, ask the question, like, are you familiar with these things? Have you ever done this before?
It's really like dating.
It is like dating. It really is, because any person that you're bringing on to such a big role, because lawyer is protecting you. You want to make sure that you are protected, and you certainly want to make sure you're protected from your lawyer. So you want to have a good relationship where you trust that person to have your best interest at heart.
Totally. I think that's such a good call out. Okay, so I found this perfect person. I've asked them the questions. They're great. How much should I expect to be paying for a lawyer?
Totally depends. And that's a classic lawyer answer to everything, is it depends. Since my practice, I form my practice to offer low price, affordable services to artists, because I understand the plight of a working artist from my time as a working actor. I know that money is tight, but I also know that artists are ripe for exploitation because money can be tight, and you don't have the resources to get attorneys to look over your things and make sure you're protected. So I do a flat fee basis for most of my work. Sometimes I'll do an hourly if it's like a really, really big project. But again, I usually like to quote ahead of time what you're expected to be paid. Other attorneys, like, especially if you're working with a really big law firm, like the big entertainment firms, they're probably going to charge you on an hourly basis. They're probably going to have a really high hourly rate. I've seen it as high as $400 or $500 an hour. And you're going to get billed at the end of the month on that hourly rate. They're going to charge you for emails that they send you. They're going to charge you for phone calls that you have with them. Sorry for my cats fighting in the background. But they're going to charge you for expenses that they incur as a result of the things that they're doing. They're going to charge you for research that they're doing. So while a big firm is really great, because they have major connections, they have maybe negotiated deals for some like big stars or big producers, there is the downside that you're going to pay a lot of money to work with those people. You're going to have amazing representation, but you're going to pay a lot of money to work with them. But there are like people like me that you can search for There are people I've seen when I was doing my business model, I looked around to see if there are other people offering services similar to mine in a similar affordable fashion. They exist. And then there's also pro bono things that you can look for. One thing I'll say is that the law clinic that I did while I was in law school was called the Independent Filmmakers Clinic. And we worked with independent filmmakers who were making documentary films, and it was all pro bono. So we did all their legal work for free. You apply to be a part of the clinic, do that. Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts is amazing. They can place your case if they find it. They offer both pro bono and low cost legal services, so check them out. I think there's another similar organization to Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts in Chicago that I'm forgetting the name of right now. But there are lots of ways for you to try to get legal advice without paying an arm and a leg. I know we're not talking about unions right now, but if you are members of your unions, a lot of them will have lawyers or business associates that can talk to you about certain things. Like, for instance, at the Dramatists Guild, we have a help desk where people submit their copyright questions. They submit unsigned contracts for reviews. And we can't legally represent them because we're not a union at the Guild, but we can give them basic advice, being like, this doesn't look right, that does look right. So if you are short on funds, look around for resources available to you. I have a blog on my website about free resources and low cost resources for artists that can't afford an attorney.
Very cool. Well, I can link that on my page as well when we're done, just so people have access to that. Yeah, I'll link to that in my bio after this. Let me just make myself a note to do that. And while I make this note, you mentioned that you were a working actor before this, and we didn't really talk about that when you introduced yourself. Do you want to give a little spiel? Because I'll read off what you have on your website, which I just love. You said, I'm an actor turned attorney who merged my passion for arts and entertainment with my formal legal training, and I aspire to create a law firm that actually understands the day-to-day struggle of the working artist. I strive to turn that struggle into a hustle that will sustain the artist and their work for the long haul. I love that. Like, I love you for this. How you got there.
I was an acting major in college. I acted from the time I was like 4 years old, and through college. A few years after college, I started a theater company with friends. After I graduated, I was out there auditioning, and I just came to this like conclusion, like panic mode, being like, I don't know how I'm ever going to financially survive, and my anxiety couldn't handle that. And I made the really tough decision to walk away from acting. And that was like one of the hardest decisions I ever made, because like from the time I was a child, like that was the only thing I could imagine doing. And so when I went to law school, I was in a copyright class, and I was like, wait a second, I can do this. I can still be in the arts world and do this thing that I love, which I found that I loved being a lawyer. I loved talking about contracts. I loved arguing. I loved all those things. And I was like, I can merge these two things together so that no one ever has to make that decision that I had to make. I think that's the key. When you're learning the craft, when you're in your BFA programs, in your BA programs, your MFA programs, whatever, they don't talk about the business. I think back to my time in my BA program, and I was like, we had a senior audition class. We never once really talked about like how you survive.
Yeah.
Never once talked about how to acquire licensing rights to make sure you weren't infringing on someone's copyright. We never once talked about things that like should be talked about. And so that's really like the impetus for everything I do, because I think there's just like this lack of knowledge, and there's a focus on craft. And I love that there's a focus on craft. Obviously you have to hone your craft, but as artists, we are not just an artist. We are CEOs of our careers. We are CEOs. We are business owners. Like if you're an actor, your business is your person. If you're a writer, your business is every play or film that you write is a new business that you're starting. And so you have to think like a business person on top of being an artist. And that's the key. And I didn't put that together until much later, after I left my career as an actor. And so I want to make sure that people have that knowledge so they never have to do what I did.
Totally. And I that resonates with me so much, because I went to school and I studied film and visual art and comedy, and I like created my own major, and I was doing performance art, and I was doing all of these things. And when I was going to graduate, I talked to my mentor, and I said, great, I love performance. How do I make this a career? And he laughed in my face, and then said, "That's a great question." And he walked away. And that was my mentor. I was like, oh, I guess you can be doing this. I guess this isn't a career. I just went to school for something that I can't do for a career. That's crazy. And so that has really driven my passion, because I spent 10 years working in tech. And now that I'm finally pursuing this thing that I wanted to pursue right out of school,
Yeah.
I am very passionate about helping creatives think about money and the business and contracts and these things. And then also why I started a fundraising business to help people like fundraise for their independent projects. Because if you have the money, you have the control, and you should be, pay your fucking creatives.
God forbid you pay the money to the people creating the things that are making you money.
Yeah, totally.
But I mean, that's so crazy to me that your mentor said that to you, because that's the perfect opportunity to be like, well, this is why I'm teaching.
Yes.
I think the only thing I learned when I was in undergrad was literally like, well, you have to have a survival job. Yeah. But there's never even like a delving in of being like, well, get a survival job that serves your purpose. They were just like, you're in a restaurant. Okay, great. Like, that's, do you have resources? Can I go work for theater? Like, or what can I do to still be involved and still make money and still pursue my craft? But they don't teach you that. They don't care. And that's actually a thing I've been doing in my day job, is that we're going to MFA classes. And I've talked to like a number of MFA programs this year, just to like be like, here's what you need to expect when you leave college.
I love that.
You are not going to get it otherwise.
It's going to be tough.
It's tough.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I have a ton more questions. So I'm going to bring us back to the questions. Next, we're moving on. So we just talked like general contracts and like really working with an entertainment lawyer. Next, I want to move on to representation. So if an actor has an agent or a manager, should they still be working with an entertainment lawyer?
As an attorney, I'm going to say yes. You might say something different, but the thing is, agents, you have to think about agents in this way. While they are working for you, they have their own interests in mind as well. They may want to get the deal done for whatever reason, and they may want to sacrifice things on your behalf in order to get that deal done, because it benefits them or it benefits another one of their clients, because they don't just represent you. Yeah. Maybe trying to do a package deal where they get both of their actors into a film or something like that. And so it's kind of like a lawyer is a backstop, because we don't have any interest in whatever happens other than getting you the best deal. Yeah. And an agent, of course, they're trying to get you the best deal, but again, they're also trying to get the best deal for them. There's a duality there that you have to keep in mind. And so the lawyer kind of checks the agent. But an agent is great to review contracts too, because they're negotiating deals every day. They're going to see things that a lawyer's not going to see, and a lawyer's going to see things that an agent's not going to see.
Totally. And so that brings me to my next question, which is, maybe I'm like just getting an agent and they sent me a contract. Should I send that to my entertainment lawyer?
Yeah, because agents are great, but not all of them are reputable. Some of them are out there to make money, and they don't have the client's best interest at heart. That's a hard truth, but it's a real truth. I know you've had that experience where you're interviewing agents that you might want to work for, and you've gotten like bad. I've talked to many of my friends who are still in the business who have dropped their agents or had disputes with their agents. And so, yeah, absolutely have an attorney review your contract so that you are 100% protected if the agency relationship doesn't work out. You want to be able to find a way out of that relationship if you can, and a lawyer is going to help you do that.
And I think also understanding exactly what you're signing up for. So again, getting a relationship. So like starting by understanding, if I book something through a different agent in a different market, do I still have to pay this agent who is not involved? Like, that is a thing that happens.
It's a thing that happens all the time, because agents are often tied to the life of a work or the life of a contract. Even if the contract is canceled and then redone, they can still be tied to that. There could be language in your agency agreement that says that. And so you really want to understand what you're signing. I think that's a great point that you brought up. I think also when you're working with a lot of entertainment attorneys, that's a good question to ask, is be like, because sometimes an entertainment attorney will just be like, okay, I read the contract, I marked it out, send it back. They're not going to tell you what's going on in the contract. Yeah, I like to explain what's going on in the contract. I'll have a call with you. We'll walk through every provision and make sure you understand what you're signing. Some attorneys will do that. Maybe they'll charge you extra for that, but just ask if that's a thing that you can do. Because one, yeah, you should understand everything that you're signing. If you have representation, don't rely on them to understand what's in the contract.
Totally. And sometimes there's edge cases that come up that maybe you weren't even in the contract and you're going to find out about later. So like, I know for myself, one of the questions that I was asking agents and managers was, I'm a filmmaker. I make my own work. I fundraise for my own work. If I fundraise for a project and cast myself in it, do I need to pay you that I cast myself in a project that I fundraised for? And some of them said yes, and some of them said no.
Yeah.
So,
and that's,
yeah.
But sometimes it will say like, any work, no carve outs.
Yeah.
You're paying me 10%, you're paying me 15%, you're paying me 20%, you know? And so you have to make sure that, especially if you're an independent filmmaker and you are making your own work and you're generating income from that work, you want to make sure that really specific things are carved out from what that agent can take from.
Totally. Can you talk about payments to agents?
Yeah. So generally they take a percentage of whatever you make that is covered under the contract. I believe it's 10 to 20% is the standard rate. That's usually taken off the top. So the agent often is the person that's collecting the monies on your behalf. They'll take their percentage and then they'll remit the rest of the payment to you. So that's generally how it works. Some people don't like to do that. Some agencies don't do that. They just want you to pay them, but agents want to make sure that they get paid. So that's why they collect the funds on their client's behalf.
And that 10 to 20%, like how would you say that the cost of having an entertainment lawyer compares to the cost of agent manager? Not that they're doing the same thing, but like if you were doing both, is it like extraordinarily more expensive to be working with an entertainment attorney as well? Or like, where would you place that?
I think, like, unfortunately, you have to use, it depends again.
Yeah.
It depends on the entertainment attorney that you have.
Yeah. Let's assume it's someone, let's say it's you.
Yeah. I mean, it also depends because it depends on when you're getting paid for this work too. So if it's 10% to 20% of whatever you're getting paid, I don't know how that can compare that to what I'm charging for my services. So you just want to look at like what you're getting paid, calculate that as to what you're paying your agent or your manager, and then determine if like getting an entertainment attorney is worth it on top of that as well, especially if you can find one that's relatively affordable.
Well, and this is a little bit out of your purview, but can you talk a little bit about the difference between an agent and a manager, and then maybe also an entertainment attorney? So what do those three things do? And do you need all three?
I think whether or not you need all three is depending on your particular situation and where you're at in your career. Obviously, if you're more well-established, having all three makes a lot of sense because a manager is really cultivating your career. You know, they're managing like where your trajectory is going. They're talking about like, they're looking broadly into the future. Where do you want your career to go? What kind of jobs should you be going for in order to get the career that you're looking for? Whereas an agent is simply the person that's getting you in the room for auditions. That's really, an agent's the one negotiating for you. Granted, I've heard of managers negotiating, that's a thing, but I'm going to tell you right now that I believe, from what I understand, is managers aren't technically allowed to negotiate. Agents are regulated. Managers are not. And so an agent is, like if you think of the word agent, they're acting as your agent so they can negotiate on your behalf. A manager, not necessarily. And so they're really cultivating your career. An agent is getting you those jobs, getting you into those rooms. And then the entertainment attorney, I think, is like the backstop for everything, to make sure that whatever gigs you're getting, whatever jobs you're getting, you are 100% protected and getting the best deal from those jobs.
I would say that is for both actors and filmmakers. Like if you're directing, if you're writing, like all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. We're going to switch back to kind of contracts in general. Should an actor have a lawyer review every contract, or are there any times when it's not needed?
Again, as the attorney, I'm going to say yes, you should. But I mean, if it's like a basic release form and you have worked with an attorney in the past on a similar release form and you know what to look for, then maybe not, if you don't want to spend the money to have someone review it. But again, like if you've done, especially if you've done multiple things and you've had an attorney review something in the past, look at them side by side, see how they're different. And you can kind of start discerning things to look for. By being a smart business person, you start discerning what makes what your lawyers including what they're taking out, what your agents including what they're taking out. And so you learn as you go. Any smart business person is, again, they're gonna talk to their lawyer and have some sort of frame of reference to know what they want in their contract and what they don't want in their contract. And so yeah, I'd say you don't, not every contract, but if it's a big one, have a review it. But if it's a small like release, again, generally you could probably be okay. You can always ask a question if you don't want a full review.
Are there any keywords that you might want to look for
in like a release?
Yeah.
So if you're in film, so the thing is that you're releasing your likeness to be used in perpetuity with this film. I've seen language in contracts before that says it specify that they can use your likeness. It just says like they can use your likeness in perpetuity, and there's no like carve out that just says it as it relates to the film.
Yeah,
that's something I've seen in release forms before, and I think that's honestly like lazy legal work, or like they didn't have an attorney write that for them. They had it just like they pulled it off the internet or something. But that's something to keep an eye out for, because when you're signing a release, essentially you're signing away your likeness to be used in this film. And so make sure that the likeness is only going to be used for that film and not for something else, because you don't, I mean, I don't even want to talk about AI, but
we're going to talk about it.
We're going to talk about it. But like, especially now that AI is a thing, make sure that the likeness is only being used for that particular thing.
And I heard you use a couple different words. So you use the word deal and you use the word contract. We've used the word contract a lot. Can you talk about, because I think that sometimes contracts are called different things, and that's not done in a predatory way, but I think that a lot of times it's called something that's like a little bit softer and friendlier, that maybe makes it feel like it's not this official legal thing. It's just like it's just a little actor release. You know, what are some other words that you've seen contracts described as?
That's a great question. So basically anything that you're signing is a contract, and they'll call it, again, like by different names. So I've heard the term deal memo. I've heard letter of agreement. I've heard memorandum of understanding. I've heard release. I've heard just agreement. One thing I'll say, term sheet is something you'll see a lot. A deal memo, a term sheet, a letter of understanding, or a memorandum of understanding, or those are generally like an agreement to an agree. So you are signing like it's the big bullet points of the agreement. And you're basically saying, these are the basic, and we're going to enter into a more formal contract down the line. And when you're signing things, let's say that, you want to make sure that there's like a time limit as when that more formal contract is negotiated. Because a lot of times producers will want a deal memo to be signed right away, or one of these like kind of pre-agreements to be signed right away so that they can get moving while the contract negotiation goes on. Because contract negotiation can be very long and drawn out, as we can see from the SAG and the WGA strikes. So so that things don't come to a screeching halt. That's why they'll have these like pre-agreements signed. But nonetheless, those pre-agreements are still binding and enforceable. And so you have to be careful when signing those as well. And again, you want to have some sort of mechanism in those pre-agreements that say a formal contract must be entered by this date or within this certain period of time, or else this becomes null and void, because they could drag you along while you're negotiating like fine deal points that are really important to you in the long run. So that's something to be aware of.
Okay, and remind us, what do they call those ones where it's like an agreement?
Called a deal memo. I've seen it be called a memorandum of understanding. I've seen it be called a term sheet. Those are pretty standard. Those are like the three terms I see the most.
Okay, great. And then I had a follow-up question on that, but what is it? Oh my gosh, it went away. It'll come back later. Deal memos we talked about. What are some, I was going to say, as a reminder for filmmakers out there, when is the right time to send out these contracts?
Immediately.
When is it? Tell me. Is it when I get to set?
Immediate. So if you're a filmmaker and you're hiring actors, you should be presenting an actor with a contract long before they come to set. I know sometimes it can be a quick turnaround, but like do it as soon as like you're ready to offer them the role, you're offering them the contract with the role, because they may not accept the role if they don't like the contract. Same with when you're hiring crew. When you're going to offer them the job, offer them a contract. Always try to do it as soon as possible. I also know realistically that a lot of times that doesn't happen. But if you are really trying to get things done ahead of time, it's always shows that you're operating in good faith. And I think that's a really key thing for people to be aware of. You want to like, you'll see good faith, acting in good faith in so many different contracts, and acting in good faith meaning is just simply like, I care about your rights and I care that you feel protected in this situation.
Totally. And if you forget and you don't get your contracts to be signed until you get to set, and your actor on set for the day tells you that they will not agree to sign that contract, whose fault is that?
That's honestly on the filmmaker. It's on the filmmaker, because unless you have some sort of like signed something that obligates the actor to do it without a contract, then like the actor is basically an at-will person at that point. So they can walk away and you're stuck because that actor was protecting themselves and their rights and enforcing those rights by walking because you presented a contract too late.
Yeah.
Are going to present a day of. I think you have to also be like, I'm presenting this to you. I'm going to operate in good faith. I'd really like you to still do this. I'm going to give you an opportunity to have this reviewed, and we'll be amenable to deal negotiations. And maybe the actor will agree to that. But if you make the mistake of not getting something signed ahead of time, you have to be prepared to make concessions.
Yeah.
Because you messed up.
Yeah. And if not, you'll have to reshoot that day.
Right.
Which costs money.
Indeed.
What are some red flags to look out for in contract and release forms? You had mentioned some words. Are there any other things to kind of look out for?
I could talk about, like, there's so many different types of contracts that one would sign.
Yeah.
Like acting contracts, again, the release forms about like what they can use your likeness for, especially now that we're in the world of AI. We'll talk a little bit about that, but that's really key. Also making sure that you're getting paid. I mean, I understand that there are such things as like low budget. I understand that you know, people want to compensate you in terms of exposure, but something I talk about in my day job all the time, like, you are creating this thing and it is your life's work. You deserve to be paid for that. You deserve to be compensated for the things that you do. Like, if you wanted to do this for fun, you would have another job and do this on the side.
Yeah.
This is your career. And once you start thinking about this as a career and a business, asking for compensation doesn't feel as you're like. And now you can also understand that when you're asking for compensation, you can recognize that there may be budgets that are tight. You could say, at the very least, I need my travel reimbursed. The very least, I need lunch. You know, at the very least, I need something or other. But some sort of recognition that you are doing this,
yeah, as
a business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that call out of like lunch or you know, just basic things where it's like, I have asks as well. Are there any things that you're finding yourself when you're looking at like acting contracts or filmmaking contracts where you're like, I'm consistently adding this? Because I think there's like a handful of contracts that when productions are going into use or going into production, they're like, I will download this from the internet, which is like, you know, they're like, oh, it's boilerplate or it's standard. So 2 questions. 1, is there such thing as a standard contract?
Sure. I mean, yeah, there's standard contracts for anything, and it's just making sure that it hits like the main points.
Yeah. But is that like what is a standard contract? Is that like a SAG contract is standard, or like the one that I got off the internet is standard?
It depends on what's in the contract that you get off the internet. Okay. If it's standard, I think what people think is that, is there like a universal template that people adapt their contracts from? And that is not when I think of standard, that's not what I think of.
Yeah.
Standard, it just has like all the terms that you'd want to see in that kind of contract in that. Yeah. Now, not standard means it's including a bunch of like additional terms that are either bad or good. Mm-hmm. So that's what you're thinking about when you're thinking about what a standard contract is. Something in terms of like what I see added a lot, and this is actually coming from working with you on stuff, is requesting footage. I think, especially if you're working on a non-union, low budget sort of thing, footage is exposure. Footage, you should be able to get that in a timely fashion.
It's often,
and I think that you've been asked of that in contracts. Yeah, it's payment. Mm-hmm. So ask for your footage. I would also say, like, you may want to ask for like approval over like marketing materials. That's something I've been seeing a lot. Clients have been talking to me a lot about lately, It's just because you want to make sure that you are presented in a good light. So you may want to take a look at the poster if they're going to use your likeness in it. Obviously, you're granting them a release to use it, but maybe you want approval over certain things. It's going to be hard to negotiate approval over like a scene with a director, but like marketing materials is not completely out of line.
Yeah, those were all the questions that I had prepared. I know we have a few folks online, so if anyone has any questions that they want to throw in the chat, we're going to keep talking about a couple more topics, but go ahead and throw those questions in the chat and I'll make note of them while we're chatting. And if you don't have any questions, just hang out. That's totally fine too. So we touched on this very, very briefly earlier, but we mentioned AI in acting and filmmaking. I think that as contracts are changing with that invention and the use of that in filmmaking, that is something that we should be looking out for as well. Can you talk about just like in general AI stuff and then maybe how you've been seeing it in contracts and then what we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now AI is so new in terms of like understanding how it relates to the law. I think the Copyright Office is constantly hosting webinars and issuing releases about how they're dealing with copyright, and it's constantly changing. So things to think about as an actor is, as you can see, like from the imitation Drake songs that are coming out, these AI generators are like pulling information to create things, and they're pulling them from all kinds of sources, and the thing is we don't know where they're pulling those things from. And so be really careful as an actor, like when you're using those apps where you are signing, or like by agreeing to the terms, you're basically like signing your likeness away, because who knows who controls that data, who owns an app, and they may be selling that to an AI bot who's now gonna start generating movies with like AI people. I mean, this sounds like completely insane, but I can see it going in that direction. Also thinking about when you're signing contracts, and actually you alerted me to this, is that people are being asked to like film monologues or film scenes or come in and get paid like a couple $100s to film something, and then they basically sign their likeness away in the release for a couple $100, and then that gets sold to some company that's putting it into their AI machine, whatever it is, and now you sold your likeness forever for a couple $100s. And so be wary of opportunities like that. I think you have to be really careful about release forms right now. I think that's really what it is, because I think the big part of the strikes that are happening right now, it's talking about AI and how are artists getting compensated for the fact that their work is teaching the AI to make things.
Yeah.
And so not just writers, but like you as an actor, like it's teaching them how to be you. Like that's scary. Yeah. So you really be mindful about what you're signing. Now, if you find out that someone is using your likeness without your consent, that's where the right of publicity comes in. There's a right of publicity is a state law that protects the misappropriation of your name likeness for a commercial use. And so if you see a commercial that has your face on it and you didn't film that commercial, then you may have a right of publicity claim against whoever created that commercial. Right. And I think as we're waiting to kind of see how the law deals with AI as it relates, as how AI intersects with copyright, how AI intersects with right of publicity laws, we're going to see how things shape up. But right now it's still so new. And I think every union, every guild, every arts organization is just like kind of like heads down reading right now, just trying to figure out what's going on. How are we going to deal with this moving forward? Because it's a scary thing, but I will also say that technology has evolved. It has continued to evolve, and somehow we have managed to keep up with it. So I don't want to be too afraid. I don't want to get so scared of AI that we just stop creating because we're afraid it's going to be stolen. And so there's a big push. I think copyright law also, there's a lot of backstops in there that are going to protect creators. Because right now, what I'll tell you is that under copyright law, in order for something to be afforded copyright protection, there has to be an author, like a person. So if AI generated work, there's a strong argument that it's not copyrightable. Okay. And so something to be aware of is Like if you're asked to write on a film or something, one thing that people are talking about is that they're having people come in and spruce up AI generated scripts. That's a scary thing, because I think that comes from the fact that like AI generated scripts right now are technically not copyrightable, but they can generate that script and then they can bring in a writer to fix it, make it better, and pay them less because they're paying them a rewriting fee rather than original script fee. And that's a problem. And so be wary of accepting jobs like that. You know, I think this is a time for solidarity. Obviously, we're seeing that with the SAG and the WGA strike, but it's not just the unions. It's every artist, because there are some artists, like my day job, the DG, we can't be a union. Like the Supreme Court has prevented us from being a union. They have claimed we're independent contractors, therefore we can't collectively bargain. And so even though we can't strike, it is a time now to like stand up for your rights. You have to. If we band together and say like this is not okay, like do you consume art every day and you're really gonna let like a robot make it? A robot's not gonna make The Sopranos. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. And I think in order to have solidarity and all that, like you need to be vigilant on your contracts. Like you have to, you're signing, and like don't assume that if your agent sends it to you that the contract doesn't have some sort of AI thing in it. Because I know my agent sent me a thing, and I actually like messaged her on this because I was like, what did you just send me? But this is what you were talking about, which is that it was a commercial audition asking actors to come in and read scripts in front of a camera, and the company was then going to sell like AI versions of those people to any commercial product that those people wanted to put in your mouth. So it was in perpetuity, and you had no right to say what the commercial could be used for or not. So you could be doing like, you're selling Pepsi one day and hemorrhoid creams the next, and you just don't know, and you have no right from doing that, and you're only getting paid the day fee for when you went in and they took your image, and then they're putting different words in your mouth and having you represent these different products. And that came through my agent, which is crazy. Wonderful. We like talked about it. She was like, I was so conflicted, but just you have to protect your
identity to you. So I have it to you, but it's good that you were vigilant and you saw it. And I want to go back to what you were saying about just being in solidarity as it relates to contracts. The power of no. I think when people say, oh, I don't have any leverage as an artist, I don't have any leg to stand on, your leverage is that you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, and I think that's a hard thing for artists to wrap their brains around, because we're so excited for the opportunity. We're so excited to work because we love to work, but not every opportunity is a good opportunity. And to be able to walk away from something, it not only protects you, but it protects the next person that they try to work with. Because if you accept a bad deal, that means that they think that they can get other people to accept bad deals.
Yes. It creates an expectation and a culture.
Right. It reinforces the bad culture. And so by saying no, by standing up for your rights, you're not only empowering yourself, you're empowering the entire industry to do that as well. And so I think that if something doesn't sound right, it doesn't feel right, feel empowered to walk away. There will be another, I promise.
And I saw, there was a quote yesterday, I think I shared it on Instagram, but it was about like people who are labeled difficult to work with are often the people who have boundaries and are asking to be respected and treated like human beings and not just being walked all over. Right? And that makes you difficult to work with. And what I say to that is like, number one, I think in that way, I think I am becoming difficult to work with because I'm learning to have boundaries and I'm learning to do all of that. And I'm proud of it. And also, like, let's all be difficult to work with, because if we're all difficult to work with, then we elevate the entire creative industry to be one where people respect us.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Like, let's disrupt the industry. Now is the time. Because I also think actors at this point in time are especially vulnerable because of the strike. They're, you're going to think that you're going to have all these amazing opportunities coming your way because they can't work with union actors. So let's go find a non-union actor to be in this whatever. Right.
Do
And you
it.
might say, oh, this is amazing. But I want you to be aware that SAG will not allow you to join SAG if you cross the picket line. So be careful. Don't accept these jobs because you think now there's a void for you to like enter this world. They're just going to take advantage of you. There's a reason SAG is going on strike. There is a reason the WGA has gone on strike. They don't want to be taken advantage of by the studios. So don't think that because they're not working with SAG actors and they're coming to you that they're not going to take advantage of you too. So
Totally.
yeah.
And I think like there's this like predatory, this like taking advantage. And I think at the end of the day, it's just like everyone's trying to like do their job and make money. And this industry is like, so it's like gambling. Every film, every TV show, it's always a gamble and you don't know if you're going to get your money back. And I think because of that, the money, it creates these like predatory practices, which, you know, we just need to protect ourselves from, which is why having an entertainment attorney.
But just also take like the fact that all of you are who have joined this live today, you have taken a step in the right direction. Yeah. You know, informing yourself,
yeah,
as much knowledge as you possibly can to enter the world as a business person and an artist is the best thing you can do for yourself.
Wonderful. So that was all of the questions and all of the topics that we were going to cover today. So I just want to say thank you so much, Jessica, for joining me, because I think like the more we can spread this knowledge, the more we can start to just like shift the culture and create more people who are, you know, quote unquote difficult to work with in the very best way possible.
Yeah.
So
yes, be difficult to work with.
Yeah, love it.
Like our mantra. Thank you for asking me to do this. This was so much fun. I'm happy to do stuff like this again. Anyone who tuned in today, please feel free to reach out to me if you have follow-up questions. I offer free 15-minute consultations, so come talk to me. I'm here.
Do you want to plug where they can find you?
Yes, check out, well, one, my website is in the link in my bio, so you can check that out, but it's also just thelitesquire.com. Check me out.